So as I've been working on Onlook, which is the cursor for designers, I've been having a lot of conversations with teams of all shapes and sizes about their design workflows, how they're thinking about embracing AI, and this kind of like new age of design engineering where designers are expected to produce prototypes rather than just static mock-ups in their work. And so I thought that it might be useful to just share a little bit of the insights that I've been picking up in these conversations. So whether you're a designer that's starting to think about using AI tooling in your workflow, or you're a design leader and you're wondering how other teams are using it, maybe this conversation could reveal some insights that can inspire you to embrace these tools a certain way. So what I did here is I used Onlook to make a whiteboard prototype here, and we're just going to jam for a little bit about what I'm seeing in the space. So to start, I think like it's helpful for anyone who's not a developer to understand what the typical life of a development workflow looks and feels like. It took a little while for me to understand that, and so I'm just going to like sketch something out here, which is probably the easiest framework for me to understand how this all works. So in terms of like the life cycle, right? You're starting with a project and you're trying to get to an end state over here. And everything above this line is good, like things are positive. And then everything below this is bad, where you're feeling like things are not going well. The reason why it's important to define these axes is because everything above this axis is where the designers have lived. So generally you're kind of working towards like this end state and things are going pretty well. Nothing's ever really broken. It just needs to be like reorganized or fixed. And so you very rarely, pretty much like it's impossible for you to dip into this like red zone over here. The difference with engineering is that you are constantly fluctuating on your path to getting to a really good outcome. And so you might start off with something that's actually like quite broken, and then you get to like the first level over here, and then you have to go back, dip below this red line where things are like really not working well. You might be running into a lot of bugs. Your code's not rendering. You don't have the right packages installed. Like you're trying to understand what's going on with your development environment. So like it's a pretty negative experience, but it's all in the interest of stair-stepping your way into like a really great user experience that you eventually will get to through a couple of trials and otherwise. So this is really important because for designers, anytime you dip below this line, it could feel really, really uncomfortable. We're always comfortable with operating in the upper part of this graph here, where the purple line, you can still see the visual output and you know that it's all working. But I think the biggest resistance designers have when they get into a development environment is that they think they have broken something, when in reality, breaking things is part of the process of building in engineering. And so I think as I've gone through the journey of becoming a designer or going from design into development, it's been a tough pill to swallow that you just have to understand that a lot of the times you're going to be working with something that's broken, and it's important for you to be able to navigate out of that to get to hopefully the end objective, which is this better product or better outcome that you're thinking about. So this chart I think is like a good representation of just kind of the difference of the processes, right? The purple line over here for design and the pink for engineering, and how you should be thinking about that. Because engineers are kind of working in a very different metaphor, I think. So I'm going to clear this, and I think maybe the best way to think about engineering or something I've kind of been working on is that you are trying to get to this end state, and you're swimming in a sea of just like total uncertainty. So here's your ocean of just uncertainty. And the truth is that you don't really know how you're going to get there, but you've picked up some tricks along the way to understand how you're going to get from this island over here to this island over here. The thing is with design, going back to that other chart, you are always looking at the deterministic way, the path that you're going to be getting there, right? You can always push the pixel a little bit over to the left. You can always like reorder things. It's very, very deterministic. But the challenge with engineering is that you're just using all the tools, all your knowledge, everything in your toolkit that you pick up along your journeys that you've made many times across the sea, to get to a state in the product that is is ready and useful for people. So for example, you might make these journeys from one island to the other and pick up some tricks along the way. So, maybe you swim this way, maybe you swim over here, and then eventually you end up over there. And you realize that it's actually like much faster for you to swim directionally like this, just across the water. Or it might actually be faster for you to use a boat to get over here. There's my drawing of a boat. So you start picking up these tricks that help you get from island A to island B. And then you can use these tricks to get to island C. So, the first time you try getting from island A to island B, it's a little bit zigzaggy. And then you kind of realize, okay, maybe there's a more direct path, and you can use a boat to get there. And then to get from island B to island C, you realize you can also use that boat to get over there. So that's like really abstract, but that's a long way of saying that as you're doing software engineering, you're not doing it entirely deterministically until you discover that there's tools along the way to get you there. And there are so many different shapes and sizes of these boats. There's so many different processes. The key thing is that to be a successful software engineer, you need to be motivated to set sail. Like you need to be able to get through the rough seas and everything in between to get from island A to island B, and then eventually end up at island C. So I think the tough part for designers is that a lot of times you look at this ocean, you put your foot in, you try to start swimming, and you're met with some sort of challenge, right? Like the water's cold, like the wind's in your face. In development, you're coming across bugs, your app's broken. And the designer's initial reaction is to retreat from that because for so long you've been doing deterministic work, right? Where every time you put a rectangle on the page, then that rectangle is going to be represented and it's going to be there on the page. And so the difference between design and engineering, right, is that you have to dip into this like really painful part of the graph to understand to get somewhere in order to go further. The great metaphor, right, of like getting to the top of a hill, you have to go back down to go to the top of another hill. That'll get theoretically be higher. So why am I telling you all of this? It's to summarize that like the new world of design and engineering requires that you bear through the grid of something being broken. You as a designer can still work deterministically, but you have to have the patience and tolerance to work with code to get the outcome that you're looking for. So let's talk a little bit about where AI fits in all of this and how teams have been working through this. So I've already talked about the difficulty spectrum here, right? Everything below is hard and everything above is easy. What we're seeing now is teams are staffing up the hard stuff for the teams that understand the hard stuff and will bear through that in order to leapfrog the old ways of doing things. So to put this in perspective, we use purple for our design, right? You would have this like linear way to get to this end state of like a great product. And the old way was engineer would go like this. And then eventually get to that end state. So what we're seeing now is like investment into different curves because you have this duality of engineering and design. And what you're seeing is that teams are now starting to staff up appropriately to play to people's strengths. So if we go back to the chart here, the old way of doing this, the design way, is talking along like this. But what teams are doing is they're now staffing engineers to do the really, really hard stuff and then hand off to design to then do this stuff. So this would be painful to a designer, the details of getting all this, the engineering setup, the infrastructure, the templating, and otherwise to comply with a pre-existing design system. But once you get over to this point, you can then hand it off to design and then set them up for success with all the hard stuff taken care of and all the easy stuff ahead. And what is the easy stuff? The easy stuff is when you get to work with AI. And AI is why this curve is so steep. It's because AI makes you move so much faster when it already has the context. But this is the hard part right here, is loading up AI with really, really good context about what you're trying to build. What I'm seeing teams do is they start delegating a really close relationship between the most technical engineers and the most technical designers to build out all the infrastructure over here in order to get to this stage where moving with AI is much, much, much faster than going through the traditional design process. Now, why is it faster? Because when you're building product, you need to understand the fidelity of an experience. Design is often about translating ideas. In fact, the whole thing is translating ideas among your colleagues so that everyone can arrive at a better user experience for your customers. If you're not able to translate this fidelity, what happens is handoff gets really messy. The good news is if you can have a really high fidelity end result, you're translating empty states, you're translating hover states, you're translating workflows, where historically, in order to finish this gap over here, designers would have to do a number of prototypes, a lot of other mockups. They would have to talk back and forth with engineering. There would be a lot of communication that still has to be brought across the table in order for you to arrive at the finish line, which is this ideal state over here. What AI does is it actually goes ahead and predicts a lot of this because it's been trained on the whole corpus of human knowledge and otherwise, and it will automatically start putting in your dark mode, your light mode, your empty states for you as you're prototyping. The reason why it doesn't work at the very beginning, and the reason why designers are really frustrated with it, is because it's missing the investment of this bottom of the curve over here. This like really big challenge, which is how do you actually take an engineering system and use all the context of your brand, try to represent the code base as best as possible, such that you can get to a state where the AI has all the context without you having to provide that and starting from scratch. What I like to call this is the J curve over here. And the J curve is the difference of how teams are operating today. Let me clear this out. Do it again. Okay, so what I like to do is call this the J curve. You have this investment over here, which takes a bit of upfront time, but then gets you to move much faster, versus the old linear curve of how design teams have been operating in the past. And so I think that the tough part is to overcome this J curve is that you need a lot of investment over here, which is painful, and people don't love doing it. And it takes doing a lot of non-deterministic work. It takes a lot of wrestling with AI. It takes a lot of translating from one design system or component system to another. But the benefit of that is that in a short amount of time, you actually can equip your team to move much, much, much faster, and therefore produce much more work in less time. Now, this upfront investment over here is probably going to have to continue to evolve, right? You're still going to need to staff up like really technical folks who care a lot about design and engineering. But this is what I've been seeing a lot of teams do. They start with their engineers working with baseline templates. They have designers who have started to embrace design, start building these templates out. They'll import them into a tool like Onlook. And the beauty with Onlook is that you don't have to refactor your Next.js projects to work with Onlook. And then what they'll do is start iterating on those templates within a tool that makes it effortless to do so with AI. A lot of teams are using Cursor, of course. Some teams are using some other prototyping tools. But what we found is that there's a lot of intimidating things that need to happen for a designer to fully embrace code. So tools that can abstract that away and make it really easy for people to digest or to at least get started are very much being embraced by these teams. And so, what we're seeing in summary is a lot of designers who are technical starting to get on the fringe of using code, but a lot of designers who feel like they are being left in the dust. They don't really have like a really easy interface that isn't super, super dev tooly for them to start embracing AI. And so that's where we come in. Onlook makes it really easy for you to prototype ideas really quickly. You can iterate on a lot of the templates that you would produce doing this hard work, so that you can get to this happy state of being able to produce really cool mockups, really high fidelity prototypes, and then in an asset file or format that's really easy for you to hand off to engineers and ship more incredible product to customers much faster. So that's like a high level overview of what I'm seeing teams do. I really encourage you to embrace the J curve. If you have questions about how, your team could embrace AI as you're thinking about your design workflow, feel free to email me. I'm Daniel@onlook.com. Always interested in having these conversations. And if you have any comments or questions about this workflow or what I'm seeing in my conversations, please feel free to drop them down below. Super cool to be working on this. Super excited to continue to see how this space evolves. But this is what I'm starting to see now. And if you're picking up anything as well, I'd love to hear from you. So thanks. Might do another one of these in the future, but really appreciate it. And like I said, feel free to email me. I'm Daniel@onlook.com. If you want to give Onlook a try, you get some free messages to just test it out for yourself. Go to onlook.com and let me know what you think. All right. See ya.